Welcome to the Future of Growth podcast with Agrify. Here, we'll be exploring all things related to cannabis, ag tech, controlled environment agriculture, vertical farming, cultivation science, industry trends, and more. Informed by science and driven by data, episodes will enlighten our audience through open dialogue with thought leaders, innovators, and industry disruptors who are forging the future of growth. Join our host, David Kessler, Chief Science Officer at Agrify, as he dives into the many facets that cannabis and agriculture have to offer. Stay connected with Agrify by joining us on all platforms at Agrify Corp and by visiting our website, www.agrify.com. Sit tight for another episode of The Future of Growth, coming at you now.
Hello, I'm David Kessler, the Chief Science Officer at Agrify, and you're joining us for the Future of Growth. Today, my guest is Robyn Lawrence. Robyn, thank you so much for joining us. You are a natural health and lifestyle expert who teaches people how to safely prepare and consume sustainably grown cannabis for health and well-being through books, media, workshops, even catered events. And you also have written several best-selling books like the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook and the Rowan and Littlefield Studies in Food and Gastronomy series, Pots and Pans, A History of Eating Cannabis. So tell us, Robyn, how did you get involved in the cannabis industry?
I came in, as a lot of people did, as a patient. So when it was in 2009. And so it was right when Colorado was just really starting to, open up. The Obama administration had said, we're going to leave medical states alone. So it felt, somewhat safe. But I really, I knew cannabis was I didn't even know when it became medical. I didn't even remember. I think I kind of remembered voting for it, but it wasn't that big a deal. Right. But in 2009, I was dealing with really, really severe. I had dysmenorrhea, which is cramps, menstrual cramps. But I had what even worse was just horrible PMS, just beyond personality changing, terrible. Right. And, I was the editor of Natural Home magazine at the time. I was, everything was herbs, everything was natural medicine, Ayurvedic, whatever. But I was so desperate. I even tried Zoloft. I just, and that was terrible. But, I was so desperate to have this not happen to me every month because it was clearly a physical issue, something going on. Right. So my gynecologist finally just said, why don't you try medical marijuana? And I was like, well, okay. I
tried everything, even things I don't agree with. I might as well put it in.
Right. Yeah. I was like, and it was interesting because it hadn't been in my world for such a long time. I was a working mom. I had kids, it's the whole thing. It just wasn't a thing I thought about. So it was just this revelation when I went. There was the dispensary right by the King Soopers that I went to. And, and actually, no, I didn't go to that one at first because I was really worried that I would run into parents of my, parents I knew and the kid, and all that, or someone I knew. And I didn't want anybody to know I was going to get medical marijuana. So I went to the next town over and I went to a dispensary there. But the thing that was really, really just amazing and revelatory to me was that the bud tender pulled down these jars of cannabis that with these, and he opened them up for me to smell. And they had these names like Chocolope and Blueberry, and they smelled incredible. And it was all of a sudden I got it, that cannabis was produce, that it was food, that it was not this brickweed that we smoked in college. And it was just,
it was the aromas that really opened up your mind to the fact that this has a flavor profile. And if it has a flavor profile, oh my gosh, it could be an ingredient.
Right. Because, what I remembered is making brownies in college, right? Sometimes they worked and usually they didn't. If they worked too well. And that, the cannabis we were using had no smell.
It smelled. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't the smell you want to be eating, right? That's why we made those, brownies to try to mask it. But yeah, that would just opened up this whole world for me. It was amazing. It was like, okay, well, this is cool. And it was also, as a mom with kids who were at that point, I think in middle school and maybe early high school, I couldn't go out and smoke. That just would not be cool. And, even though it was legal, I just, smoking in front of kids.
Socially with the children, right? The different level of responsibility.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. But, I could eat an edible and calm myself down, be a better mom, honestly. And, no one's the wiser. So I realized that, but the edibles at the dispensaries, and even still, unfortunately, were sugar, just sugar. And I love sugar. Like I love sugar. So I try really, really hard to keep my sugar consumption to a minimum because I'm kind of an addict. So, so I wanted to make my own food and I realized I could make savory food in that way. So in 2009, there wasn't a cookbook out. The first one that came out was in 2012, and it was the High Times Cookbook. So, there really wasn't, and I got on the forums. And at that time on the forums, it was dudes who were growing. So, they knew a lot about growing, nothing about cooking, but they would kind of put a lot of really kind of sometimes really scary opinions about what could happen if you cooked with cannabis and did it wrong, and how you could send people to the emergency room and dose your grandma and all these terrible things. Right. So, so I knew that I needed to write my own book. Like I needed to, this is how I've always learned things. When something intrigues me, when I really want to know about it, I'm like, this is my little superpower. I can start talking to people and learn and convey this information. So I was just like, well, I'm going to write the cookbook. I need to write the cookbook. So I contacted 12 chefs across the, who were in legal states. And the amazing thing to me from that is that all but one were immediately on board.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And they were just like, absolutely, everybody needs to know. Pretty much I would say almost every single one of them had either cured themselves or cured someone they love with cannabis and cannabis. So it was really important to them to, they weren't like, no, these are my recipes. These are, I'm not going to share them with you. This is my, I'm not going to share how, everybody was just like, here's how I do it. What else do you need to know? More recipes. They would like send me, God, I was finishing the book over Valentine's Day. Right. And I was, they were stepping out of this crazy Valentine's Day kitchen and sending me like things on napkins. It was great. I mean, it was great. It was just, it's really, I've written 5 books now, and this one is always, I think, going to be my favorite because writing is a pretty solitary pursuit. But this one was community. This was all about community.
It was collaborative and it was community-based. That's wonderful.
I wanted to call it the Cannabis Kitchen Cookbook Collective, but it got too.
That's a lot of alliteration, Robyn.
But marketing always shoots me down. But
I like alliteration too.
I know, it was too much. But it definitely was a collective. I mean, it really was. And these chefs are going to be, kind of my inner circle, dear to my heart forever.
That's amazing. I tried your amazing lemon poppy seed pancakes, and they were fantastic. Nice. But before we get into some actual recipes and things, maybe we can talk a little bit about the history of cannabis. Cannabis isn't new to people. It's not new to civilization at all. Yeah. And it looks like from your books, not only did you investigate, the history of cannabis as it was consumed, but overall, just a little bit of the overall history of cannabis.
Yeah.
So how did we get to cannabis? And then from cannabis, how did they start using it in food?
Well, it was, and it's interesting. It was used in food in certain countries and not in others, so it became in the Middle East and Persia and ancient Persia, food was really one of the main ways that it was consumed. In India, it was a little of both. They would use, they would smoke, but they would also use food. And then, and in both of those countries, the psychoactive piece of it was very important. That was something that they really, I think it's really interesting because, in the Middle East, that was, in the Muslim religion, alcohol is banned. So, cannabis became the intoxicant of choice, really. So it was, but, and it was interesting because, finding out in Africa, couldn't really find any evidence that it was ever eaten. Pretty much all is smoked. So
right, daca was a smoked part of the ritual.
Correct. Yes, yeah. So, very different from country to country, and so there'd be a really rich history in some, and some would be like, "Dang, can't find a thing," right? So,
I bet they were doing it. We just don't have a record of it.
Probably, and that is probably true. I mean, a lot of it is, what Western records I had access to and all of that. So, but yeah, so, it was in some, so in India, it became, such an important part of the culture, such an important part. And, they really 100% believed that it was Lord Shiva's favorite food. And that he gave it to humanity as a gift, that it was his gift to humanity. So it was, not only enjoyed, but, really revered and respected. So, and
I could see how they would think of it as a gift because of the diversity of uses, from fabric and fiber to food, to an intoxicant, to medicine. Yeah. There's just so much that one would have to say, how were we blessed? Right. With this bounty, this cornucopia from a singular plant. So that's fascinating. So it is. It makes its way into history of human beings as an intoxicant. It is part of the food in some cultures, but not others. How did they deal with, I guess, the early psychoactive nature of it? In, for example, decarboxylation. We should probably tell people what that is and why it's relative to cooking, but maybe you can take that.
So decarboxylation is basically just, so in its raw form, the cannabinoids, THC and CBD being the main ones, in their raw form, those are actually THC acid, THCA, and CBD acid, CBDA. And so in order to be converted to THC and CBD, so to make the THC psychoactive and bring out some of the, other properties in the CBD, they need to be heated so that they can lose that acid molecule. So that's what it takes. So basically, when it automatically happens when you smoke it, because you're heating it,
the combustion, right? The heat.
Yeah, right. But a lot of times when you're cooking it, you're not getting enough heat there. So you have to decarboxylate it first. So all that means is basically you cook it in an oven, right? So you put it in an oven at around 200.
Not 400, right? We don't want to make it.
With cannabis, you never, ever want to go above 350. And, the lower, like if you can stay in the 200 to 300 range, that's the best, that's the safest. But above 350, we pretty much know you're going to start degrading your THC.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, ideally you make an oil extraction and you add that like after at the end.
So if there is something you're cooking that, isn't going to be heated, then you want to go and decarboxylate that first, which means you would have to pull the active ingredients out of the cannabis and put them into usually a fat of some sort. Is that right?
And so that's not the actual decarboxylation, that's the extraction. Okay. So first you're going to decarboxylate. You're going to put your cannabis in just in a single layer on a baking sheet. And so one of the chefs that I worked with for the cookbook puts it in a turkey bag. It's just another layer of keeping it all in. It's a really good idea. And then you put it in about a 200 to 220 oven for, I like to do like 40 to 45 minutes just to be really safe, because I've decarboxylated too many times, where you get to it, it's like, this should be way stronger. And I know that I didn't do it long enough. So I kind of err maybe in going farther than I need to. Just you don't want to
keep it under 350 and make sure you get it fully decarboxylated. Okay.
Under 200. I keep it 2 to 240, right? Okay. Right around there. Yeah. And then, 40, 45 minutes. And then you're going to smell it. It's definitely, that's where the smell comes into your kitchen. So you'll know, and you'll see it. It turns a kind of a little bit goldeny, and, it looks cooked. So, but then you're going to use that too. So then the next part of this whole equation is that, that these cannabinoids, THC and CBD, are fat soluble. So they will only get pulled into your extraction if you use a fat. So that's why you can use, butter, oil, milk, cream, honey. Sometimes. But anyway, so yeah, that will, and that will pull the cannabinoids out, and then they will be in the fat. And then you can use that butter, oil, cream, whatever to make whatever you want to make. And so, so that's how it's been forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, right? I mean, they figured this out down through the ages. The thing that happened, in the last, I guess, 3-4 years is that they discovered how to make cannabinoids water soluble so that they can turn them into a powder or a liquid or, and basically then you just add those to your food like you would add baking soda or, vanilla or whatever. And so that was 100% game changing, no longer, that's why in the beginning, the cannabis beverages were just terrible, because right?
It was like an oily layer on top of root beer. And it was like you have to shake it up.
Right. And it still didn't really work. Yeah.
No.
But, so this, now that they can do the water soluble, it's like just drinking a regular soda or beer or whatever.
Well, let's talk about that, because the water soluble technology is new, right? We are not dealing with our parents' pot brownies anymore.
Exactly. Not at the least. Yeah.
But there is a difference between a lot of those water solubles, which utilize either an isolate or distillate, which is a singular molecule or maybe two molecules, let's say THC and CBD, as opposed to a full spectrum, which is where I take an actual flower with these robust terpene profile and cannabinoid profile, add it to my fat, decarboxylate it first, and then I'm getting all of the elements of that cannabis and not just the psychoactive component. Now, do you find there's a difference in the food? I mean, obviously there's a flavor difference, but what is your finding in terms of working with isolate and distillate versus full spectrum starting ingredients?
They're completely different highs, if you will. With a distillate, with one of these, one thing is it's fast acting, which means it comes on in 15 minutes as opposed to food where you have to wait at least a half an hour and sometimes up to so that's a nice thing. That's a bonus, but it also goes away faster. It doesn't, right? Yeah. So it comes on in 15 minutes, but it's over in 20. So that's just, how at least in my experience. And I feel like that's, when I was doing my catering business, I liked to use one of those in a mocktail at the beginning of the thing.
To warm people up.
Exactly. So people start to realize, okay, oh, right, we're getting hot. You know what I mean? This is starting to happen so that you don't sit down and just chow down.
So Robyn, how did you start when you do a catering event? How do you like to kick those off with an isolate or distillate involved?
I generally do use the distillate or isolate. I usually use Ripple powder for the mocktail. And I feel like that's a really good way to do it for a couple of reasons. It's fast acting. So within 15 minutes, they're going to feel that. And they're not going to sit down to dinner having already ingested and then ingest more on top of it. So they're going to understand that, oh, we're getting high. It's starting to happen. I need to be a little bit careful. I need to not just eat,
limitlessly,
a bunch of extra sauce and yeah. So it's nice that way. And, it really does only last like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So it's wearing off by the time their food that has the oil or the butter or the, really, I feel like when you cook with the oil and the butter and the fat, I feel like you get a much more overall high. It's not so heavy, much more body and, and just, way slower to come on, way slower, just, lasts longer. So it really, it's nice to just kind of warm people up and remind them we're getting high here with the mocktail, and then, let them really enjoy and savor the flavors of the cannabis and all of the reasons that, to me, this is the art, right? This is the art of cooking with it, is when you use the oils and the butters and all of that. And, it's kind of a quick quick tip, when you use the powder, it's not the same.
That's it. And if for anyone that hasn't tried your mocktail recipes, I have to tell you my personal favorite by far, cannabis coconut mojito. I love cannabis. I love coconut flavor. It is delicious. You have an incredible list in your Cannabis Kitchen cookbook. For our listeners, please check it out. Everything from your Central Park North to your Mary Jane Daiquiri. But they are delicious. They're wonderful. And I like that you were taking people through a little bit of a trip, not intentionally. Let them get high, kind of experience that edible experience, bring them down. Then you have the food and you can get the full complexity, the intersection of cannabis and food in the flavors and the high, that full spectrum impact that really gives you a unique experience.
It really does.
One thing that you brought up that's probably worth us diving in is you were talking about your individual experience about how a water-soluble isolate or distillate impacts you. I think it's important when we talk about edibles and we're espousing how amazing they are to also talk about the differences in your own biochemistry. Every person has a different biochemistry. The ingredients in cannabis react differently. The favorite analogy I've ever heard is it's a lot like listening to music. We can both hear the same concerto from Mozart. It'll touch us differently. We'll experience it differently, even though we're listening to the same exact piece of music. And so with that, I just want to remind our listeners that, always start incrementally small with edibles. Make sure you're in a safe place. And do you have any other tips about how to really enjoy the cooking? I love cooking in general, and it's really easy when you have a delicious cake in front of you to have 2 slices, but that's a no-no with cannabis. So tell us a little bit about your tips on, safely and effectively using cannabis in food.
I think that is the thing. It's we've been saying in Colorado for 10 years now, start slow and go. Start low and go slow, right? So that's the bottom line advice to everybody. But it's what I do when I'm doing dinner parties is I don't ever infuse the main event, right? So if we're doing, let's say, a porterhouse with chimichurri, okay, the chimichurri will be infused, not anything to do with the porterhouse itself. And I will always offer non-infused chimichurri as well, because that's the thing. You don't want to get to a thing and you're like, wow, this is amazing chimichurri. Pile it on and you're sure. Just like, no. So, and so I also like to, I like to, definitely guide people and keep, an eye on them, because we're here to take care of them, and that's our main that's our main priority. But also just let them be a little bit in charge of their own destiny, right? So there may be someone at one end of the table who has never done this before, and 10 milligrams for the whole meal is going to be just fine for them, right? And there could be someone like me who I need 100.
Don't be ashamed of it. It's okay.
So
Responsible and safe use is important, and it's good for everyone to remember to kind of, like you said, low and slow. You can always add more. It's really uncomfortable to take it back.
And that's the thing. And it's physically impossible to die. We all know this, but when you're in it, you don't know that, and you think you're dying. So, then as the host, it's never happened to me. Although it has happened to me that I had a friend who, not on my dime, but she overate, and I had to take care of her. And it was, I kept telling her, you won't die. You're not going to die. She's like, no, I'm dying. Like, I'm not coming out of this. And we were up all night and it was terrible, and she was throwing up, and it's not pleasant. But
no, and for experiences like that, it will definitely reinforce the low and slow mantra.
Yes, it will. I mean, I feel like people generally don't do that twice.
No, I hope not, right?
Yeah. So, but it's something. It's definitely something to be. And I think that it's something those stories have scared people off of edibles a lot.
Yeah,
and that's kind of too bad, because it can be done safely, and especially with all of the. Now we have machines. You can buy a magical butter or Oliva oil machine that, will make your infusion for you. So you're guaranteed that it's, had the right amount of heat and all of that. And then you can go online and there are calculators that will tell you exactly how much THC is in your oil or butter or whatever in your infusion. You can even take it all the way down to how much is in each serving of this recipe. And it's all just online on a calculator, right?
What you'll need for that is the volume of fat as well as the concentration of cannabinoids in the cannabis and the weight, because it's all a weighted relationship.
Yes.
And so for everyone, but those calculators are amazing and they prevent the unfortunate occurrence of, I think it's a reasonable amount, and then you end up taking care of your friend.
Right.
So now in cannabis, when it comes to food, we're seeing a food movement across the country. People care about what they're putting in their body. I hope that they care about the cannabis that they're putting in their body. But
we have some education.
We're seeing farm to table. We're seeing a localvore kind of movement, a non-GMO, and it's the non-GMO, not the strain. The GMO strain is great, but the genetically modified plant material. So what other kind of movements within food are you seeing with cannabis? Is there a change in, what was to what is now?
Not as much as I wish I have seen. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's probably where we've least evolved in a lot of ways, at least as far as offering people diversity and choice. It's still sugar. There's just, pretty much
almost all of it is sugar-based.
I compare it's like trying to go find dinner at a 7-Eleven, right? I mean, there's no sustenance. Everything is crap. And it's, and I think it's kind of too bad. And it's weird to me, given that what you just said, that these two forces haven't converged. But I think, people are still kind of seeing it not as food, but as medicine or whatever. And so it's just not, it's like, it's really easy to pop a couple gummies.
Yeah. Well, I remember the early days of legal cannabis, even they weren't doing homogeneity testing, which is to make sure every brick of your cannabis had the same amount. So it's like you could have been throwing them back and you get to your last 2 or 3 and it's a very different experience. So I think when we get to the idea of safety and consistency, a regulated cannabis market is a good thing. It's going to ensure the uniformity and the safety. But to that end, I really think that there is a move from the consumer side that their products need to be more CPG, more consistent. So that when you go and you buy some Blue Dream flour that's really great and you enjoy cooking with, you're going to cook with it again and it'll give you that same experience, that same chemical profile, and therefore will translate that to your food and to your experience when you imbibe that food. But unfortunately, the industry is not really producing consistent cannabis. And that's where Agrify's technology is so important, because it really does allow a consistent flower product to be grown. And that leads to a safer food and a better and easier way of cooking with food. If all of the time my carrots had a different density, it would be really hard to cook with them.
Oh, it would.
As an ingredient, it's so diverse. Yeah. So that's it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, we've come a long way. We've got a long way to go. But
that's right. And so as we look to where we're going, we've talked about homogenization and full spectrum and bioavailability. Water solubility, I agree, was huge because it really did allow you to infuse things that had a delicate flavor or not to overwhelm it. Because what I remember when I was young, and my methodology for the way I was taught to make brownies, and this is a long, long time ago, forgive me, was essentially to take cannabis, mix it with butter in a crock pot, let it sit for several hours, and then use cheesecloth to extract it. And it worked. It decarboxylated it and it transferred the molecules to the fat. But when I cooked with it, it tasted like I licked a plant. And it wasn't the best taste. Instead of that chocolate, the chocolate becomes a masking agent. Yeah. So with your recipes, I have to say I was surprised how much the flavor in the pancakes actually complemented the other elements. It was mild. It was there. It was an ingredient. It wasn't meant to be in the background. Yeah. But what are some of the other recipes for people that are looking to experience that beautiful complementary aspect of the cannabis profile and flavor in some of the ingredients. Do you have a couple of recipes that might be, favorites of yours?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think, the chefs that I worked with were almost split almost completely evenly on whether you should mask the flavor or whether you should let it shine through. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of on the side of you should let it shine through because I want people to know they're eating cannabis. I don't, you need
not to surprise them.
You're right. You need to be reminded with each bite that, oh, right, this is cannabis food. I am not just gonna, take this down. So I've always been a believer in that. But so many, like we have in the cookbook, there's a lemon ginger sativa soup that again, another one where especially if you can get a lemony strain,
something with like a lot of limonene, a lemon haze, or
right, or exactly. That is just, it's perfect. It complements. It's wonderful. It's that's what it's meant for. So that's like you're using it then like you would use basil or thyme or rosemary, right? You're really using it as an herb, as a seasoning. And a multifunctional one, which is cool. But so I believe in that. I think anything lighter, if you don't like the flavor and you really just can't stand it and want to mask it, that's when you're going to want to use things like chocolate and warm spices, things like cinnamon and cardamom, things like very. I think that may be why in the bong that they make in India. Have a lot of those
the milk drink, right?
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They drink for holy. And I think I think that it's really a personal preference, but I personally believe in really, that's how I got into it. It was because I love these flavors and wanted to play with them. Right. So I believe in really, and that makes it so much more fun. To me, this is what makes it the art, right? You're like, oh, you go to the dispensary and you're like, I found this amazing blueberry. Like, what could I do with that? What could I play with it?
I buy with my nose. My eyes are secondary. And in a post-COVID market, I don't know whether or not we're going to be allowed the opportunity to smell the cannabis. But for me, it's a driving factor.
Oh, same. And there's so many. I hate when I go to a dispensary and they pull out your plastic pre-packaged thing, and I'm just like,
you don't get to see it or smell it.
Oh.
Here's a question for you. So we already know, for example, from a biochemical side, myrcene can give you some of what they would say is the indica or kind of stony effect. Mm-hmm. There's also evidence that you can use myrcene, which is a terpene produced by lots of plants, for example, mango, right, to enhance your cannabis experience. So I guess if you start looking at the terpene profiles, which is the molecules generally responsible for the aroma of cannabis, you start pairing that with the naturally occurring plant-based terpenes in recipes. Has there been any formulation where you're picking your cannabis by its chemical profile based on what it complements as a food ingredient chemical profile?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I try to do it whenever I can. I know that all the chefs that I worked with do. I think that's 100% a natural, to really, and again, it's respecting this as the produce that it is. Right. And, I think and that's what's been really, I think, wonderful about what's happened in the last 10 years is we understand it was always about milligrams of THC. Yep. For so long, it's like this plant is nothing but a producer of THC. That's what it does.
So much more. It produces over 550 chemical metabolites, and we're just scratching the surface. So whether you're cooking with lemon and you want to add limonene, or whether you want to enhance the flavor profile, that terpene list, the chemical profile of the terpenes for the cannabis flower, it's so incredible. With basil, there's the Italian basil, there's a Thai basil that has a different flavor. But with cannabis, there's thousands of different flavors. And so it's so the opposite of limiting. It's free. Right. You have the opportunity to combine it with amazing things. So it's an exciting ingredient as well.
Well, and my other favorite part, and this is only, if you're in a state where you can grow your own, but is using the leaves, the fan leaves, which are amazing food, full of nutrients, they don't have any THC to speak of. So that's why they've always just been treated as a waste product. But it drives me crazy that there in Colorado, we're still making growers weigh their leaves and throw them away. Like I can't go get any.
No, you can't. Even though there's not an appreciable amount of THC, it's
Right.
a legal byproduct.
Yeah.
We could make a lot of changes to the regulated system, but
Yes, we could.
not there today.
That would be one of my first, because it's just, I mean, we're throwing away good food.
Oh gosh, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
When I was doing a shoot for the Hunger Games, we made sure to give away all the produce to homeless shelters because we're going to waste it. No. It's unfortunate that that's the way things are in the regulated market currently, but it doesn't mean that they won't change.
It doesn't.
So, and the more we learn about the science and the chemistry of cannabis, I think the easier it is to make sensible regulations. It's very challenging as we're still learning so much about this amazing plant. Robyn, listen, I love to cook, and I can cook eggs or grilled cheese, but I can even do a beef Wellington like the piece behind me. That said, I am not a food artist or an expert like these chefs. So where does the intersection of cannabis, food, and art and science really come into play?
Well, I mean, I think there's the science is what we've talked about, right? You have to decarboxylate, you have to extract, you have to understand fat soluble, all of that kind of
spectrum versus isolate, right?
Exactly, right. You have to. This is all facts. This is all fact based, right? And then there's still a lot of interpretation. There's still a lot of
coconut oil, vegetable oil, butter.
All of that. Yeah, and then people, like, hey, how about honey? Oh, look, honey works. That's fun. So it's all the different ways that you can use these becomes, just this unlimited possibilities. And I also think that, again, we're seeing a lot of, in Colorado, my company was really the only one that was doing actual dinners.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, infused dinners. Mostly what you see is pairing. So, where they're doing it like a wine pairing dinner, and you smoke and then the terpenes match that course.
So a paired menu.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like a wine pairing. But yeah, it's really cool. And there's a company here called Cultivating Spirits that's been doing it for a good, long time now. So that's a great way to do it. And, one of the reasons that it's so hard to do cannabis dinners is because we could not buy the cannabis or supply the cannabis. So our clients always had to go get the cannabis. Right. And then we had to show up early enough to make infusions with the cannabis. And it was a whole rigmarole. It was hard. It was a lot of, it was a lot of
unnecessary work.
Steps. Exactly. But, we paid lawyers a lot of money to help us figure out how to do that. So, we did it. But yeah, I mean, we're still in a little bit in an industry that's where things can be difficult.
It's finding itself. It certainly isn't the end of cannabis industry's evolution. We're at the beginning. Oh,
we're at the very beginning. And it's interesting to see, like in Massachusetts, tons of dinners happening. So many companies doing it. So I don't know why Colorado, it's just not happened here. Social consumption's a problem. That we allow it. It's crazy, but yeah. So yeah, we have a long way to go. But I think as far as we're going to start seeing more and more and more of that intersection. I think when we can get beyond these laws, so people can throw a farm to table dinner where the kind you imagine with the big table, the big long table out in the field, and all of that, and you can't pull that off right now. Really
no, I'd love a day where you could buy a mature plant even and bring it home the way you bring living herbs home and cut off of it.
Right.
When I think of that intersection of art and science and cannabis, I love what you said. The science is in how we ensure that full spectrum of diverse chemical profile is infused into the food. But the flower itself is almost like the colors on a palette, with every strain giving you different flavors, different aromas, and using them with different pairings. And that's the art, right? How do I take this and make it work with this particular food? So it is a beautiful intersection, and one that I think would be a lot of fun to explore, but you got to have a little extra time on your hands.
And hopefully grow your own, because it's
That's right.
if you don't, And
it is legal to grow your own, everybody. And I encourage you, if it is legal in your state, to give it a try. It's a
changes your whole
wonderful hobby.
Yep, it really
does.